Today I wanted to talk about the concept and the experience that we have of being influenced by other people and influencing them. In other words, there's a lot about who we are that is developed by self. And we've been talking a lot about Pirkei Avot and how Pirkei Avot is really about bein adam la'atzmo, the self-development, intrapersonal. But that intrapersonal, the internal, cannot be separated from the interpersonal. And there's an amazing battle that goes on in this week's Parsha. I would call it like a battle for public opinion. It's a battle for influence, and it goes to the heart of the idea of influencing, how much influence we in fact have on one another. Because this week's Parsha is Shelach, which is the Parsha that Moshe sends the spies into the land, the 12 spies, to go have a look. They're about to, and the plan was that they would conquer the land, so he sends the spies to bring back reports from the land. And as we know, what happened was he sent 12, 10 come back with a negative report saying the land is beautiful, but they're formidable enemies and the task is too difficult and painful, and let's rather turn around and redo our plans. And two of them stand firm, Caleb and Yehoshua. Those are the two that come back and say not only is the land good, but we can actually conquer it. And really what goes on here is a battle for influence between them, between these two groups, the 2 versus the 10, and even internally in the group. Before they are sent off on this mission, it says that Moshe changes the name of Hosea into Yehoshua, which means you shall be saved, because he says he's davening for him that he should be saved from the influence of the negative spies. That's and Caleb himself, when they arrive in the land, it says that someone goes to, it says Vayavo, he arrived in Hebron, and he went to pray at the grave of our ancestors of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And Rashi there says it doesn't refer to, the text doesn't refer to Caleb, but Rashi brings from the Midrash, Caleb went to go daven there so that he would stay strong from the influence of the other. Because you can imagine, a group of 12 spies, 10 are coming back with a negative report, say this is undoable, it's too hard, it's too dangerous, let's abort this mission, and 2 are standing firm. So obviously the 2 are going to come under enormous pressure from the other 10, and then they come back and there's a huge battle for public opinion when they come back with their reports. So the 10 spies come and say the land is a wonderful land, it's full of blessing, but the enemies within it are formidable, it's going to be too tough, we shouldn't do it. And then Caleb tries to convince them. He says, Alor na'aleh, let's go up, v'yarashnu ota, we can still do it. And there's a whole debate that goes on. And then Caleb and Yehoshua join forces, and they give a speech, and they say to everybody, come, we can, if we all want to do this and we stick together, Hashem has promised we can get through with this. But what happens is the 10 spies with their negative report win the battle for public opinion. And the nation turns on Moshe, and they say, look, we're not going in. We know Hashem has promised us. We know this is why we came out of the land we came out of Egypt for this, but we're afraid and we want to turn around and go back. We're going to appoint a new leader and turn around and go back to Egypt. And then Hashem says, okay, you're not going to go in, you're going to wander in the desert for 40 years, and your children and grandchildren will enter the land. And it changes the course of Jewish history, because the 2 good spies, Yehoshua and Caleb, lost the battle for public opinion. They stood strong in that they were not influenced by the other 10, but they were not able to persuade the people. They lost that, and everything went wrong from then onwards. What the Parsha brings home and it highlights is a major theme within Pirkei Avot, and that is how much we are influenced by each other. And there are Mishnahs that say that we have to understand the influence that people have on us and act accordingly and proactively. So the Mishnah, for example, in chapter 1, Mishnah 6, it says, Asay lecha rav, designate for yourself a rabbi, a teacher, kaneh lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge every person favorably. And Rabbeinu Yonah says, what do you need a friend for? You need a friend to learn Torah with. You need a friend who's a good enough friend who will tell you when you're going wrong in life. And you know where that criticism is coming out of love, and they're trying to help you to become a better person. So you need a friend to do that, and you need a good friend to give you advice. That's another role for a friend. He describes the 3 roles for friends, and one has to be open to that. But then you've got to find a good friend, a person who's going to influence you on the right values. And related to that is the very next Mishnah, which then says the opposite. In chapter 1, Mishnah 7, Harkeik mishachen ra, distance yourself from a bad neighbor. Al tischaber l'rasha, do not become friends with a person who is evil or bad, because they're going to take you on a wrong path. Meaning, once we understand that we are the product of the influences around us, we have to proactively then find good people to associate with, so that those good people can influence us on the path of good, make sure that our values and priorities and what we do and how we see life and all the things that we do, we in fact go about that and carry that out. And part of it is, and that's why it's interesting, it's in the same Mishnah, and judge every person favorably. Why are all those 3 statements in the same Mishnah? So Reb Chaim Volozhiner says a very, very interesting thing. He says, you'll never have a rabbi and never have a friend if you don't judge people favorably, because everyone has got their shortcomings, everyone makes mistakes and does wrong. If you're going to be looking too harshly, on the other hand, you need to find good people. So there is the balance. You're looking for people who share your values and that you look up to their values, but nobody's perfect. None of us are perfect. So therefore we have to, it comes with this idea of generosity of spirit. And actually, Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky says, when you judge people favorably, you see good in them. Then you are influenced for the good, because when you look around you, you're seeing good people all the time. Where if you're looking negatively, you'll actually see bad people, and that itself will have an influence. This is a very well-established principle in research. I mean, there have been so many studies that have been done. There's that famous Asch conformity experiment that goes back to the 1950s. Professor Solomon Asch did a thing. It's astounding when you think about it. He did an experiment whereby he drew 3 different lines, and one line was clearly longer than the other 2. He then planted people in the experiment who would say that the longer line was shorter. And then he brought in people to come and say, so you're there, and then 10 other people say, no, that longer line's shorter. Then they ask, and more than a third of the people conformed to what the others did, even though it was clearly a longer line. They said it's shorter because they just heard another 9 or 10 other people. It's very hard to escape groupthink. It's one of the most well-established principles in behavioral science. Even just by association, there's a famous study that was done. It's called the Framingham study, where they said that if a friend becomes obese, you've got a 57% chance of becoming obese yourself, just by association with another person. It's not just on attitudes. And there's one study after another. It's one of the most well-established principles in behavioral science, and that is we're influenced by the people around us, their opinions, their behaviors, their actions. And today we live in a world for competing influence and competing ideas. It is something, however, that goes even one step deeper. Because remember the Mishnah we discussed last week, chapter 2, Mishnah 13. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sends his students on a mission. He says, Tzu uru'u, go out and see Ezohi derech tova, go find the good path that you must work on. Last week, one of the answers which we went into last week was ayin tova, the good eye, to look at things with the generosity of spirit. We discussed that, and a sense of satisfaction and contentment. That we discussed last week. One of the other opinions here was Rabbi Yeshua says chaver tov, and Rabbi Yossi says shachen tov. And now consider a good friend and a good neighbor, which means this. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was actually saying to them, remember how we mentioned from Rabbeinu Yonah that he said, find the gateway, value, and character trait which is going to influence everything else in your life. And they came back and said, so the first opinion was contentment. They come back and said, no, it's the good friend and the good neighbor. Now, how is that? You see, Rabbeinu Yonah defines it as a character trait. So there's an action element that you want to surround yourself with good people who share your values. But then there is a character trait, meaning seeking out a good friend and a good neighbor, and growing from that is not just a tactic, it's actually a character trait. What is the character trait at stake here? And that goes to designating a rabbi, finding a friend, all of these values that we're talking about. It is the character trait of humility. As it says in Pirkei Avot in chapter 4, Mishnah 1, Ezehu chacham, who is a wise person? Halomed mikol adam. To be able to learn from other people, to, in other words, proactively look for sources of influence which are positive. To learn from others requires humility. The interesting thing about the Mishnah, it doesn't say Ezehu anav halomid mikolam, who is the most humble, a person who learns from all people. It's Ezehu chacham. And it means who is wise, meaning, and this goes to the heart of what this character trait is about. It means we don't have all the answers to everything in life. No one person does. Hashem, human nature is such, you have an opinion on something, it feels like your opinion is right and you believe it. But we need the input from other people. There is a wisdom in saying, I know my limitations, I know I don't know everything, I've got to learn from other people, and an openness to do so, which touches on another character trait in chapter 5, Mishnah 24, where it says, Az panim legehenom. It talks about a person of az panim. Az panim means a brazenness. And the way that Rabbeinu Bachai explains it is this, and Boshet Panim is the opposite, a person of empathy. There's brazenness and empathy, which Rabbeinu Bachai says relates to humility, it goes to this, it requires a mindset of seeing the people around you, appreciating their viewpoint on it. That's why actually the heart of Torah learning is always with the chavrusa. It is being the method of style of learning is that you learn with somebody. You don't learn on your own, because when you learn on your own, you're in your own thoughts. You see it completely from your perspective. And you think that when you're learning with the chavrusa, then the chavrusa is now saying, but actually I see it differently. Then you have to learn to hear them. And in life, you need chavrusas. You need chavrusas in business, in career, in family, in everything that we do. We need somebody else. But to be able to benefit from the advice of another, from the inside of another, we have to be open to it. We have to be able to be subtle in our thinking, to have the humility to see things from other people's perspectives. And therefore, what Rabbeinu Yonah is saying is that a chaver tov and a shachen tov, it's not just a tactic to have a good friend and a good neighbor. It's a fundamental character trait. What he's really saying is this: the gateway character traits to all good character is to be a good listener, to have empathy, to have humility, to listen and to hear other people, to see other people, and in that way to be enriched by the shared knowledge and wisdom and perspectives of others. So it's not just a tactic of good influence and bad influence. But what's fascinating about that Mishnah, where Rabbi Yochanan's student there answered Chaver Tov and Shachen Tov, the one who said, Rabbi Yoshua said Chaver Tov and Rabbi Yossi said Shachen Tov. And when he says, what's the most negative character trait, they say chaver ra and a shachen ra. What's fascinating is Rabbeinu Yonah says, it's not just that you should seek out a good friend and a good neighbor. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, you should become a good friend and a good neighbor. Now, and this is where understanding the power of the influence of others means understanding our power to influence others. So there has two dimensions. One is we seek out good influences for ourselves. We distance ourselves from a bad neighbor, a bad friend, people who don't share our values, who are going to take us on a path which we don't want to go on. And we know if we hang around with those kind of people, they are going to take us in a path which is not healthy and good for us from a spiritual, moral, emotional point of view. On the other hand, it is understanding the power of influence and accepting responsibility to be an influencer for the good, to be someone who has an impact in changing the narrative and being an influencer for the good, which on one level means, for example, like it says in chapter 1, Mishnah 1, Hamidu Talmidim Harbe, teach many students. So some of the commentators say that's talking to rabbis and teachers. Go find many students to teach Torah. The Tiferet Yisrael says that means every Jew has a responsibility to teach Torah. You know something? Teach it. You heard a good word about the Parsha? Share it at the Shabbos table. Find someone to learn with. Everyone should be a teacher. It's not just the preserve of those who are professionally employed to do so. And it's deeper than just teaching. It is influence. In chapter 5, Mishnah 21, it says like this: Kol ha-mezakeh sarabim, whoever brings merit to the many, it says, Hashem says that they will have the power of transcending sin. Ein chet ba'al yado, no sin comes to them. And it gives an example. It says that Moshe brought merit to many people. And Yoravam, who was an evil king in Jewish history, who set up idols, he brought everybody to sin. And so therefore he was held responsible for all of the sins and the wrongdoing of the nation. And Moshe was given the credit for all of the mitzvahs. So when we influence people to do mitzvahs, to do good, to do the right thing, we get the merit of what they're doing. And when we do the opposite, and so what becomes is then it is part of being a person who's an agent of spreading good ideas, both to individuals around us, but also to society. And it comes from two motivations. One is chesed, kindness. If you really believe this is the way to live, and it's the good thing, and it's the right thing, and people will become better, and that they will achieve more in this world and in the next world, you'll want to share that with as many people as possible. It's not only chesed, it's truth. Emes, Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying God's name, meaning a person who truly cares will want that the truth should triumph in the world. And the world is about this battle of ideas. That's what it is. We saw that with Yoshua and Caleb. They were trying to persuade the people. We know it's going to be hard to conquer the land of Israel. And we know we got lots of enemies and the road ahead is uphill. But we can do it. It's worthwhile. Hashem's on our side. We can do it. And then the negative spies who said, no, we can't do this. The negative won the battle in the end. Okay, in the long run, it turned out the forces of positivity were able to overwhelm. And Moshe said, we'll have to wait another generation. But what we see playing out in our Parsha was this battle for ideas and influence, which happens both on an individual and personal level. It happens on a societal and a communal level. And this goes to the heart of leadership. If we were to say, what does it mean to be a leader? And a big message in Pirkei Avot is that everybody's a leader. There isn't just a group of people who are the professional leader class of society. Everyone has to assume responsibility to be a leader. And the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot puts it in the most beautiful way. Chapter 2, Mishnah 6. It says, Uvemakom she'ein anashim hishtadil liyos ish. In a place where there are no leaders, strive to be a leader. Meaning, leadership is not something that a person wants as an ambition to be a leader. But in a place where no one else is leading, then you must lead. So, but what does that mean when no one else is leading? There is always a role, whether that's within your family, a parent to their children. There's nobody else to lead your children except you. Siblings, friends, in a community structure, in a business, in an organization. You've got to see, I have a responsibility. We've got to constantly be looking. Maybe there's somebody else who can do that influencing. Then we let them do it, because we're not looking to hold the position, but it is about assuming responsibility. And the way that it phrases it's so interesting, where there's no one else to do it, meaning you shouldn't be looking to be in the lights and in the head of everything. But you have to see, what is my responsibility? What is my fiduciary responsibility? Who am I responsible for? Who are the people around me that need my leadership, my guidance on this thing? And then you will find there are many, many situations in life where you are the one. And you know where it starts? With yourself. Here's the interesting thing. On this Mishnah, the Rambam and Rabbeinu Yonah say, if there's no one else to teach you, you teach yourself. If there's no one else to inspire you, you inspire yourself. They say it also on that Mishnah in chapter 1, Mishnah 14. Im einani li mili. If I'm not for myself, who will be for me? Meaning, I have to own my own responsibility in life, which means I'm looking for good influences. I'm looking for a rabbi. I'm looking for a teacher. I'm looking for friends. I'm looking for family to influence me on the right path. But ultimately, who is responsible for me in my life? Im einani li mili. If I don't do it, no one else is going to do it. And b'makom sheinish, if there are no other leaders, I must be the leader, starting with myself, and then reaching out to the people around me. But that leadership therefore requires, as we learn from our Parsha, Yoshua and Caleb, it requires independence, integrity, to be able to withstand the negative influences, to be able to think clearly, to hold the line of the right values, and to do so with empathy. Here's the fascinating tension between independence and empathy. Independence says, I will follow the right path, doesn't matter the influences. Empathy is, I'm constantly looking for the wisdom and the insight of others. One has to balance between those two things. That is the art of leadership, to be able to balance between independence and empathy, to be able to listen and to speak, to be able to influence and be influenced. We constantly are juggling between those two identities, but all of us are assuming leadership responsibilities, and leadership is about influencing. It's about winning the battle of ideas with ourselves, with our loved ones and friends, with society as a whole, so that together we can influence ourselves and make this world into a better place. Thank you.